Zimbabwe's Emerson Mnangagwa narrowly wins the country's hotly contested presidential election. But the opposition candidate says the results are a sham. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed hopes new connections flourish after his visit to the United States. And in our Music Maker segment, we highlight Sierra Leonean performer Fantasy Wiz. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidui. You are in for Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Controversy is swirling around the release of the Zimbabwe presidential election result. Opposition leader Nelson Chamisa is expressing contempt for what he calls the vote rigging in the high-stakes election narrowly won by incumbent Emerson Mnangagwa in the first vote without long-time leader Robert Mugabe on the ballot. A short time ago, Mnangagwa held a press conference and said, quote, "It's time to put politics behind us." He also urged calm and called for unity among the Zimbabwean citizens to move forward as a nation. Chamisa is questioning the outcome of Monday's vote, in which he lost out to President Mnangagwa of the ruling ZANU-PF party. Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission Chair Priscilla Chigumba announced the result late Thursday, saying Mnangagwa had won by 50.8% of the votes cast, while Chamisa garnered 44.3%.
The votes received by Mnangagwa Emerson Dambudzo of ZANU-PF party are more than half the number of votes cast in the presidential election. Therefore, Mnangagwa Emerson Dambudzo of ZANU-PF party is therefore duly declared elected president of the Republic of Zimbabwe with effect from the 3rd of August 2018.
Chamisa says the opposition will challenge the election results and claims that he won significantly. He says Zimbabwe's government is not legitimate. The Movement for Democratic Change spokesman Morgan Komichi is calling the election results a sham.
They are fake, they are not authentic, we're not part of it. Those are really figures from ZEC. So as far as we're concerned, we reject them, we don't respect them, and we can pronounce today that the elections were fraudulent.
President Mnangagwa countered by saying, quote, "We won the election freely and fairly and have nothing to hide or fear." Tendai Mugadi, a ZANU-PF supporter, is pleased with the poll outcome.
We are happy and we are hoping for a lot. Our new president has been telling us a lot of things that he is promising us. This is a new Zimbabwe, new dispensation. We are happy. As the youth, we are also willing to support our president.
Mnangagwa takes over Zimbabwe's leadership amid tension and chaos in which 6 people have died in an army crackdown on opposition protests. For more insight on the unfolding scenario in Zimbabwe, I'm joined by Leon Hartwell, a Southern Africa political analyst who has lived in Zimbabwe and written extensively on the nation's politics. Leon, welcome to Africa 54 again.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Leon, we have a post-election violence going on in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
With Nelson Chamisa standing his ground that this is not legitimate and he is going to fight this. What do you think is going to be the final result of what we are seeing unfolding in that Southern African country?
I don't see that there's going to be a change of leadership at the top, despite the fact that the MDC is claiming that this election was rigged. The opposition has not yet showed concrete evidence to demonstrate that the results were cooked. I think part of this also relates to the electoral process, some of the unfairness that we've seen in terms of media coverage and so on, which favored ZANU-PF. But those aspects in terms of freeness and fairness are much harder to prove than, say, for example, images of ballot boxes that were stuffed or concrete evidence to show that.
There's fear of tension continuing to rise. We've seen today journalists being kicked out of a press conference that Chamisa was going to hold. We've seen chaos in the streets of Harare. We've had even people being told, get out of here. The elections were announced 11 p.m. Harare time. What does that tell you of what is likely to happen in the next couple of days?
It's true that we've seen some chaos in Harare, and that Nelson Chamisa had a press conference which was disrupted by the police. But at the end, they were also allowed to continue with their press conference. I think it largely relates to this hangover of what happened during the Mugabe years, and Zimbabwe still needs to deal with that. At the same time, Mnangagwa has very quickly condemned what happened, and he said, we need to do away with this. The police can't just act in that way. The question is, what is going to happen in the future? And I think it depends on how the opposition responds to this. If they continue to say, well, this election wasn't rigged, they might push people to go to the streets and so on. But at the same time, some people might just say, you know, let's just move forward because we would rather have stability than see the military on the streets again.
What about the critics who say, and very quickly, that Mnangagwa's leadership may largely be influenced by the military who put him in power in the first place?
It's interesting because when I lived in Zimbabwe, I remember a particular conversation with Mnangagwa, who was defense minister at the time, and I was trying to pick his legal mind because he was, you know, he has a degree in law. And I asked him about that, and he said to me, well, I'm a military man. And I think that fear came out in the post-election scenario. But I think he's been very conciliatory after the election.
Do you think they will influence his leadership, or he will, you know, does he have to toe the line because they put him there very quickly? Is it a yes or no? Or you think he will have his own opinion?
He has to tread carefully. And I think what we saw with both the police and the military being deployed might show some divisions within at the very top. It looks like one hand didn't quite know what the other one was doing.
Leon, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Leon Hartwell is a South Africa political analyst with a lot of insight on Zimbabwe. Now, after a whirlwind 6-day visit to the United States, Abiy Ahmed, the new Prime Minister of Ethiopia, has returned home. Now, the question is how newfound relationships will impact one of Africa's fastest changing countries. Salem Solomon and Karina Chaudhry attended one of the Prime Minister's business meetings in Washington and has our story.
Everywhere Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed turned in the U.S., he found supporters. At events in Washington, Minnesota, and Los Angeles, the Ethiopian diaspora cheered one of Africa's youngest and most dynamic leaders. Abiy met with religious groups, opposition leaders, and Vice President Mike Pence. Now, he's back home and hopes to translate new connections into fresh opportunities.
We have returned after a successful visit accomplishing our long-term goal to connect with our Ethiopian American community. The main goal during our stay was to break the wall of hate among Ethiopians and build a bridge of love and connectedness. This was possible because of the determination and heartfelt wishes of Ethiopians in North America.
For those in the diaspora ready to reconnect, it's Abiy's willingness to listen that makes the difference.
He understands actually the resources that are available with the Ethiopian diaspora. Many educated Ethiopian scholars and professionals, many Ethiopian businessmen and women.
Ethiopia wants to capitalize on those resources by opening its doors and letting investors find their own opportunities.
We may tell them, you know, this is what we have, but with the exposure and experience, they may see beyond. So let them come and see, contributing the benefit.
Those experiences include entrepreneurs' efforts to improve the lives of women. A registered nurse who started a breast cancer foundation says women are the cornerstones of their communities and country.
Our organization has been helping women in the diaspora and in Ethiopia for the past 6 years. We are now in the process of registering in Ethiopia. We hope to build a cancer center in the country.
A young lawyer with an opposition group hopes a conducive environment will help him apply the business chops he honed in South Africa.
I can bring this skill, experience back home and try to create jobs for a lot of people.
Some in the diaspora are ready to help, but remain realistic.
I'm very happy that we have a young leader who envisions moving the country forward. I call on Ethiopians to be patient because change always takes time and doesn't happen overnight. I would say give it a chance and help in an industry that people contribute to and move the country forward. As Dr. Abiy said, we should be the leaders of Africa.
For now, the government is focusing on regional integration and connecting to its diaspora.
It's time for Ethiopians and the diaspora community to get together for unity. There are so many differences that held us back, and we're not able to communicate well.
There was a tremendous sense of optimism among Ethiopian Americans. Even before Abiy's visit to the U.S., remittances sent back home from the diaspora had begun to increase. That's a trend Ethiopia hopes to accelerate as it moves to privatize its economy and shift its focus away from infrastructure investments and jumpstart the commercial sector. Salam Solomon for VOA News, Washington.
Now, for more insight into Prime Minister Abiy's visit to America, VOA's Amharic reporter Solomon Abate joins me in the studio. Solomon, welcome back to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you for having me.
You were at the airport when Prime Minister Abiy arrived in the U.S. You attended all three meetings from Washington, D.C., Minneapolis, and Los Angeles. Did all Ethiopians here receive him the same way?
Yes. Esther, you cannot imagine how hard were all the fora the Prime Minister had been last week, and it's very difficult to wrap it up, in such a short period of time, what happened in these three states. It was very, very amazing what the Prime Minister saw during his visit to Ethiopia. In Washington, D.C. only, about 40,000 Ethiopians met him at the convention center. In Los Angeles and Minnesota, about 15,000 almost in each met the Prime Minister, and everybody was cheering and singing.
A very, very warm welcome to Prime Minister Abiy.
It was warm, really.
What about when you talk to Eritreans who also attended these meetings of Abiy? What are they saying, especially given that he is forging this new relationship with a longtime enemy and neighbor?
Esther, besides Ethiopians celebrated, this new Prime Minister, and his visit to the United States was one of the manifestations of this celebration. It was a celebration of the renewed relationship between Eritrea and Ethiopia as well. In all three towns, in all three cities, there were Ethiopians and Eritreans joined together in welcoming the Prime Minister.
Now, very quickly, Solomon, Prime Minister Abiy met U.S. Vice President Mike Pence. Do we know what the discussions were like, very quickly?
Yes, that meeting was not pre-planned, I think, but on Friday, on the 27th of July, Vice President Pence met with Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, and they discussed on some regional issues, and the Vice President commended the changes in Ethiopia, and he called these changes historic, and that was a big reception at high level for Ethiopian leader.
Thank you. Indeed, they are historic.
Yeah,
He's right.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Solomon Abate is VOA Amharic reporter. Now, still ahead on Africa 54, Sierra Leonean performer Fantasy Wiz. But first, a look at Friday's headlines.
In Zimbabwe, riot police break up the news conference of opposition leader Nelson Chamisa, who has denounced Monday's election results as rigged. In Mali, opposition chief Soumaïla Cissé alleges fraud after neither he nor President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta win more than 50% of the vote in the first round of the presidential elections. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, a new outbreak of Ebola is emerging in a rural, conflict-ridden area of the North Kivu province 2 weeks after the World Health Organization declared the country Ebola-free. In Nigeria, over 2 million bottles of codeine cough syrup are recalled to fight the opioid abuse after a previous ban on the import and production of the cough suppressant. In Egypt, a teenager with dwarfism practices bodybuilding, proving his dedication and willpower.
Adiwale is a 2015 Mandela Washington Fellow and CEO and Director of Tender Arts Nigeria. Kunle uses his artwork as therapy for children with cancer, among other many community services in his native country of Nigeria, and he joins us here in the studio to tell us more. Kunle, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
First of all, a lot of people will have a hard time understanding how art and medicine can even work together. Can you tell us a little more about how this is working for you?
So for me, it's about integrating and incorporating art into hospital, like music, drawing, paintings, creative writing, dance and movement, and seeing how we can use this to improve the well-being of patients and also transform the healthcare experience of caregivers too.
Now, what about when you visit those children with cancer in the hospitals and use your artwork? Tell me their reaction. How do their faces change when you see them?
You know, for some of them, usually they on their sick bed and, you know, they're there, bored, depressed, tired of life. But then immediately I walk into the oncology ward, you know, spread out my paint and invite them to the table. You know, there's this transformation that takes place that is like, it brings life to them and their spirit is uplifted.
What usually do you draw for them? What do they like most?
So usually the way it goes is that I ask them what they like most, what they love most, and I use that as a point of reference to get into them and probably ask them to draw that out on a canvas, and then we paint together collaboratively. And in a way, that resonates very deeply with them because it brings joy and happiness to them.
You attended a 2018 summer program at the University of Florida where
Yes.
they teach art and medicine. What did you learn from there that you're going to take back to Nigeria?
So I'm taking back professionalism. You know, first and foremost, 2013, I started using art in the hospital, and in 2014 also. But then that was based on passion. So passion is not enough. Knowledge is very key. So I'm taking that knowledge of professionalism in the area of using art in the hospital and that learning the best practices on how to use art to better the lives of patients in the hospital. And I'm also taking back partnership because we brought about 7 Nigerians to University of Florida this year to come and learn the best practices. About 4 of them were medical students and 3 of them were visual artists. So what that means is that like every year now, what we have in mind is that next year we'll bring another set of people, not only in Nigeria now, but other parts of Africa, just like the yearly program.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you, whether you're going to spread this good news to the rest of Africa, you know, countries around West Africa as well.
Definitely, because now presently our art and medicine project is on about 18 countries in Africa. Ethiopia, Uganda, Somalia, you know, Tanzania, and all that. So we're looking forward to seeing how to bring these young professionals from Africa next year and see how they come and learn the best practices on the use of art in the hospital. You know, if you go to Africa, you don't get to see this kind of engagement where art is being used for sick people, but if you come to US and other developed countries, you go there, you see how art is being incorporated into all this healthcare system, and you see the way it helps better the lives of patients. So there is this holistic wellness. But when you go back home, it's narrowed, like it's just one direction. But in a way now, so opening that channels and opportunities for professionals in healthcare, social workers, occupational therapies, artists cannot think about how they can use art to improve the well-being of other people.
Kunle, I'm very proud of you. Being one of you from Africa, I am very proud of the art that you're doing and what you're doing for the children. Thank you very much for coming on Africa.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Kunle Adiwale is CEO and Director of Tender Arts Nigeria. The Young African Leaders Initiative, or YALI, brought together 700 young Africans from across the continent for a summit here in Washington this week. They are part of a Mandela Washington Fellowship, which is YALI's flagship program. YALI was launched by former President Barack Obama in 2010. It was his signature effort to invest in the next generation of African leaders. We spoke to some of the fellows here in Washington to find out what this opportunity means to them.
There are so many Africans who will just never have the same opportunity. For example, this is my 4th time applying for this fellowship, and I'm here. So going back home to Africa, specifically to Liberia, I'm going to work with those who were not fortunate to come. That all is not lost. Go back in your communities individually and see how many persons you can bring along on the journey.
I've lost 2 of my neighbors, 2 women that died of breast cancer. And I was like, how can I help? What can I do? And I was like, okay, you have 13 years of experience as a journalist, and you also hold a master's degree in environmental issues, so you can combine and start with this first environmental communication startup to better inform my community, to raise awareness on health issues related to environment. That's what I'm doing now.
This is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. Like, I've never believed in the African continent the way I do now. I've met tremendous young people who are doing amazing things that I look at them, I believe in them, I believe in their vision, and I see Africa rising because I see their passion, the great things that they are doing at such a tender age. I'm just amazed to be part of this network right now.
When we got here, I got a chance to meet more than 600 fellows doing as well different things in their communities, and so it's so inspiring. And when we look back at what Mandela has in person, so we could say, wow, if one person created this impact into the world, that we have a program today called on his name, Mandela Washington Fellowship, so how more if we follow his steps? And when we are 700 young leaders throughout the country, if we just do what Nelson Mandela did, so we could say, yes, we will have a world to be a better place.
It's Music Makers Friday, and today we are featuring music by a Sierra Leonean artist, Fantasy Wiz. She has surprised many in her country for choosing to perform for an unusual audience, people in jail. Joining me in the studio with more on Fantasy is fellow Sierra Leonean David Vande, host of African Beat radio program. David, you're very welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you. Always excited to be here.
This young lady is surprising. First of all, she sings traditional music.
Yeah.
And she's performing to people in prison.
People in prison.
You've talked to her so many times. You've played her music on your program.
Exactly. Exactly. You see, this young lady is a different kind of young generation of musician. She decided to go purely traditional folk music. You know, when her peers are going with the hip hop and the hip life, she said, you know what, I want to stick to my culture. I want to make sure that our culture does not die. So we have people that we call the jelly bears, like the town criers. They tell stories through music. And so she's using that style to portray her music. And she has been going places. So she's one of the few that first female to perform, first of all, for inmates, like you said, in the prisons, went to the special court, performed for the female inmates there, and she also liked to teach. She has been a presenter on United Nations Radio. She has done a whole lot of stuff, and some of her campaigns that she has been doing is say no to rape, violence against women, because in our country, so many wrong things have been going on when it comes to women. And so this young lady said, you know what, I'm not just going to be any other kind of musician. I want to advocate for women. I want to advocate for children. You know.
Tell me a little more about her choice of where to perform. One of the biggest prisons in Sierra Leone, and also the women prison. What was the message about? Why does she like to?
Well, when I talked to her about that, her main reason for going to those people is that these are people who think that they have been condemned, they have been left to themselves, that nobody cares about them. And so she decided to go in there and give them encouragement, to let them see that hey, in as much as you're in here, but there are people out there who care about you. We want you to come out and be somebody in society. That is a message to them.
Very good, especially coming from a country that really experienced a lot of war and a lot of pain.
Yes.
So what's her next move?
Well, she's been working on new projects, but this song that we have today is one of my favorites that she did.
And what does it mean, by the way? Yellow something?
No yellows me.
No yellows me, yes.
It simply means don't be jealous of me.
Don't be jealous of me.
Maybe I'm achieving something. You are seeing me now. I am David Van Der, and I'm here. I'm Fantasy Wiz, and you are envious and jealous of me. You don't need to be. You have to try for yourself,
David,
and be somebody.
We have to hear this music. Don't be jealous of me either.
Definitely.
David, thank you so much for another fantastic Music Makers segment. David Van Der is the host of African Beat. And so we're going to leave you with Fantasy Wiz in this beautiful song that she calls No Yellows Me.
No Yellows Me.
And from all of us here in the studio, we thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.
Solos Beats. Fila titana filale saba saba titana sabale nani motimo nani bansa no ya bendima wara sinin ko wara fila wara mekiri wara filale sing konya bendima konan metumbale ta kibini de tansoro musu kana say no you lost me my man is it musu kana say no to me, my man is it. Musu kela say no, you lost me, my man is it. Musu kela say no, can you me, my man is it. I see you say like you, not so easy. I see you say want you, not so easy. Musu kela say no, you lost me, my man is it. Musu kela say no, to me, my man is it.
I know the ass like you pass to me. Nah. I know say get for last to me. When you the pose like the selfie, I'm chilling with Bay. Watch, make you know say you don't pass to me. You the bluff, you the hook, other man in the look. When you check and you slack, other man in the book. You not safe even when you don't enter the books. They stress pan the vast and they wait for the hook. Like I chop, you chop, we none not gets right. So stop the fest like it's your bet, right? You open teeth, you fit in bed, right? Be yo, we all a mess, right? I chop, you chop, we none not gets right. So stop the fest like it's your bet, right? You open teeth, you fit in bed, right? Be yo, we all a mess, right?
Musu kela say no, you lost me, my man is it. Musu kela say no, vet me, my man is it. Musu kelen koi bole bonka man na kezaya. Musu kelen koi bole bonka man na kezaya. Musu kelen koi bole bonka man na kezaya. Ibole bonka man na kezaya. Musu kelen koi bole bonka man na kezaya. Ibole bonka man na kezaya. Ibole bonka.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Today's episode won't cost you anything.
Freebie.
Let's see what this one is about.
Anna, I love my job.
Oh yeah? Why is that?
I get so many freebies from the bands I write about. CDs, t-shirts, water bottles, even tickets to see them perform.
Wow. The only freebie I ever got from my